Hello, brothers. My name is Doug Draper. I'm a 1992 graduate from the University of Kansas, and I would like to welcome you to On the Banks. Some of you may know that On the Banks, it's really the only fraternity podcast where we meet brothers, share stories, and embrace our shared values of the fraternity. Today, we're going to talk about mental health. Mental health is arguably the biggest challenge impacting students across North America, and it's a huge topic of discussion across campuses in North America. And on this episode of On the Banks, we're going to learn how the Western Ontario chapter is not necessarily talking about the problem, but they're taking action. And they're taking action with honoring a brother who abruptly took his own life in 2009. So there's no better way to get started and talk about this and really understand the impact that Western Ontario is having is to bring on our guest, who is Andrew McCann. Andrew, thanks for joining On the Banks. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Awesome. So before we jump into it, we kind of like to learn about our guests, right? We're all brothers. We all like to learn a little bit about something. So before we get into the topic, just kind of tell us about yourself, where you're from, why you decided to pick Western Ontario and the Fiji chapter, and what are your grand plans when you graduate from college?
Yeah, of course. So I was born and raised in Calgary, Alberta, in Canada. I moved over to Western in 2018. And so I've been here for the last 5 years. I'm finishing up my 5th year of my degree, where I'm completing an honors specialization in economics and a minor in computer science. And so after university, I'm going to be moving to Toronto, which I'm quite excited for. And then hopefully I'm planning on moving down to the States, pursuing a role in consulting, and then eventually venture capital is my end goal.
Nice. Yeah, I think when you and I were talking earlier, that's an impressive resume. I was just trying to get through college when I was there. So kudos to you. It's you're representing our organization very well.
Thank you.
So, yeah, of course. So let's talk about the event, right? It's an amazing tribute to a brother. It's an incredibly important cause. And why don't you kind of jump into it and talk about the event you put on and a little bit of the history.
Yeah, so the Austen Berlet campout is a campout in honor of one of our brothers. So the chapter of Western Ontario was founded in 1968, but we recharted in 2008. And so Austen Berlet was actually one of our founding brothers during the recharter. And unfortunately, as you mentioned, he abruptly took his life due to mental health issues. And so in honor of his legacy, with his family and with the help of the CMHA, our chapter started this event called the Austen Berlet Campout for Mental Health. And so the goal of this event is not only to raise money for the CMHA, but also to raise awareness around mental health, which is something that wasn't really talked about back in 2000, like the late 2000s era. And so now we've been doing this every year. We work usually in the fall. It's about a week-long process of tabling to raise awareness. We do something called the whiteboard campaign, where everyone writes why they camp out. So I camp out because it's okay to not be okay. I camp out for a specific person, such as Austen Berlet. I camp out for myself, really helping raise awareness for that week on campus. And we do it right in the center of campus in a building called UCC. So it's really our community center. And then at the end of that all, we come together for an event. And so in the past, it was typically a lot of speakers, where you would see speakers such as the mayor, you'd see the CMHA, motivational speakers. And lately we've pivoted into a bit more of a concert-oriented session, so that it brings out a lot more of the community while still holding the speakers. So you'll typically see the MC come up, do the introduction, the CMHA will come up, do an introduction, then we'll have a local artist perform, then move into some more keynote speakers, then another local artist to wrap it up, before we spend the evening camping out in honor of his legacy, again, to raise awareness. And we'll do that on Concrete Beach, which is just outside of our community center on campus.
That's great. So I know you used the initials CMHA, the Canadian Mental Health Association. Talk to us a little bit more about that. I just want to make sure our audience understands what those 4 letters mean.
Yeah, so the Canadian Mental Health Association, pretty self-explanatory, I think, in the name. They represent mental health across all of Canada. So they're a nonprofit organization. They have different kind of similar to a fraternity where they have their overarching organization, but then they have chapters in each city. And so we work directly with the London chapter to really impact our community right here. And they're entirely centered around mental health, and really mostly crisis mental health, not long term. So you would go to them for a crisis situation where you need help immediately, and then they would help you in the immediate and refer you to more long-term mental health care if you needed that.
Got it. Okay, great. Thanks for that explanation. So the event is generally in the fall, and it's kind of an all week event. One of the things I want to slice that into a couple different things, because there's um, two things that caught my attention. One is the whiteboard, right? That seems pretty cool. So give us a visual what that looks like to the audience, and then maybe if you maybe what you have written on the board, or what some other brothers have written, or maybe some messages about why you're camping out. So explain and give us a visual of that whiteboard and some of the things you've seen written on the.
Yeah, as I said, there's usually tons of stuff that gets written on them because it's a very personal experience, and we get a lot of people in and out of Fiji, and also in and out of the Greek scene in general. Since we're in that community center, our campus isn't as similar to the US, I don't think, because we're Canadian, where a lower percentage of the population is in the Greek community. My understanding is that most of the US Greek community is quite large. And so for us, it's really important because it's probably one of the closest events to the non-Greek community when it comes to philanthropy, where we're getting high levels of engagement since people are just walking through. And so it's really similar to just any type of mental health awareness event that's going on. We partner closely with our student council, and we'll set up a giant banner right in the middle of the university community center. And as people come by, we'll be tabling, and we'll invite them to come take a picture with the banner that says Austen Berlet Campout, and they'll write on there. And as I mentioned, usually a very common one is it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to talk about mental health, or specifically naming someone that has been affected by mental health, or lost their life to suicide.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really cool that it's inclusive, right? It's not just a Fiji event. It's not just a Greek event. It's a student event, and I'm sure there's even folks outside of the university that partake. So the inclusion of the event is really cool, and speaks to your
Yeah.
chapter.
Yeah, and we work very closely with Austen Berlet's family. They come every single year and speak, and they're always so excited to see that it happens year after year after year, because obviously none of us in chapter now ever knew him because it's been over 10 years, but the legacy still continues, and we're still doing the important work, which is what really matters.
Yeah. Well, good Fijis think alike, because that's exactly what I was going to have you talk about. Would you, as far as his family coming back to speak, I don't expect you to resuscitate what they've spoken about, but that is quite an honor every year to come back. So talk a little bit about maybe what they've talked about, and kind of what it's like there whenever the parents of Austen stand up and speak to him, and either his struggles or his successes. So walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, it's always quite emotional. I gotta say, there's always a lot of tears when they come up and speak every year, and a lot of chills. They have some very powerful things to say, and they always talk about just what exemplified him as a person, which is so interesting because it's also what exemplifies a good Fiji and what makes us all so excellent. And yeah, just he was like such a loving and caring guy, where he never wanted to do harm to anyone. He just wanted to go hang out with his friends, complete his degree. He was also very, very bright. He'd had published papers already. He was pursuing his degree in physics, so quite a bright mind, which was really unfortunate that we lost him. And it's yeah, it's always a tough thing to talk to his parents, especially when they're giving the speech. And I know it's tough for them too. And we really appreciate that they come in every year and do that.
Yeah. Yeah, we've talked on a couple other of the episodes that we have with undergraduate chapters about philanthropy. And one of the successes is having that personal connection with the chapter, not flipping over or opening up a phone book. And I'll explain to you what a phone book is later. But to have that personal connection, and the fact that they come back year after year, I can just imagine how impactful that would be in the audience listening to those parents.
Yeah, it really is.
So tell us a little bit about the honor comes with the fundraising, and we're going to talk a little bit about how you use that money in a second, because it is I was blown away when you were talking to me about it. But first and foremost, like, how do you guys raise the money? Is it just donations whenever you're at the table? Are you soliciting? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so it's pretty multi-pronged, I'd say. So ticket sales is obviously a primary revenue source.
Mm-hmm.
During that, we also work with other members of our Greek community. So they'll come in and they'll generally table at our event, where they'll host their own, whether it be auction or some form of event that they can charge people for. I think one year one of the sororities was doing Pie of President, something like that, which was pretty fun. So they coordinated getting all the presidents involved on that. And then the next kind of prong of that revenue comes from corporate sponsorships. So we spend a lot of time, usually starting around now, so December, January, calling up different corporate sponsors and saying we have a full corporate sponsorship package, which includes the benefits of each tier that you can sponsor at. And we just start calling them up and seeing if anyone wants to donate. And sometimes they'll donate goods, or times they'll donate cash. And then if they donate goods, we'll use that into a silent auction as well.
Great. Yeah. So it sounds like if the event's in the fall, and you just said now, which
Sorry,
is January.
it's in the spring.
Oh, okay.
Misspoke
Got
earlier.
it. Got
Yeah.
it. Maybe I misunderstood, but still,
Yeah.
I think the point there is it's not you just wake up and decide to do it in a week. There's some strategy and planning around.
Yeah, generally our team will start generally we'll start around talking in August, September, because that's when the school year starts picking up, and it'll more just be ideating on if there's any major changes we want to do. And
Yeah.
then around November, everything will be in line. And then by January, once we come back, it's a big sponsorship push. And
Mhm.
then the event is generally in March. So you'll see around the end of February, start of March is when all of the stuff starts showing up in our house to prepare, and it just gets piled into closets as we're storing it before the event.
Yeah. Great. Well, the one thing that impressed me, Andrew, about the chapter and your approach to this is that, after you raise the funds, you're just not writing a check and mailing it off to the headquarters of the Canadian Mental Health Association. You guys have done an amazing job of keeping it local, right, to the university. And then talk about that $700 a day, that whole story that you laid out for me. I thought that was pretty impressive. So talk to us about the local, and then talk to us about that $700 a day figure.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the CMHA kind of operates in a fraternity where they are across all of Canada, but they have their local chapters. So we work with the local London, I think it's the Middlesex chapter is the exact name, which is a subsection of Ontario. And then and so usually what we're doing is we have a special account set up with them. So we work directly with about 2 to 3 people, and the funds in that account are directly used for our campus. So they don't go anywhere else in the CMHA. They're only used for funding on our campus. And so I spoke with them, I think about 2 years ago, because we were trying to understand what the cost was. So it may have risen a little bit, but it was approximately $700 a day to operate these crisis counseling sessions. And so these crisis counseling sessions that operate on our campus are essentially satellites that exist usually during exam period, because that's the highest stress time for a student, where any student can walk into a CMHA crisis satellite station on our campus and get help immediately. As I said, the goal isn't long-term help, it's immediate help. So maybe you're really stressed about your exam tomorrow, or you just failed an exam and you know that, and you're not in a good mental health headspace, you would be available to go to these campus CMHA crisis centers. And this is really important because during exam season, our campus used to not actually have the mental health support open when we were first starting this. Now they do have it open. However, it's generally at capacity, so it's quite difficult to get in with anyone to speak to them. And so by working directly with the CMHA and setting this up to ensure all the funds are going directly to our campus, we're able to go to our sponsors and say, for every $700 that you're able to donate, we're able to keep this crisis counseling center open for an extra day on our campus. And so I know that we've been averaging about between 25 to 30 days of funding each year now, which is pretty strong. And it's really nice to be able to quantify it in that way. So I'm not just saying, oh yeah, we raised blank dollars. I'm saying we kept our crisis counseling centers open for 25 days on our campus during exams.
Yeah, that is so cool. You know, the thing I like about that one is it's tangible, right?
Yeah.
That when you go out and talk to a sponsor, a supporter, you know, even somebody that's writing on the whiteboard, and you know, $700 equals 1 day of support. That's a you know, powerful message and very tangible. So that's cool that you guys found that connection.
Mhm.
And to 28, what'd you say? How many days? 28 days you've been able, or 25?
Yeah, it's usually around 25. I think the highest we ever did was about like I want to say it was like 38 days. The highest we ever raised was just shy of 25K, which was
Wow.
quite exciting.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about the chapter and their relationship with it.
Yeah.
So talk about the motivation, right? When we're talking to different chapters, they want to do something. They
Mhm.
want to help out. They want to live the values of the fraternity, friendship, knowledge, and service as part of that.
Yeah.
So you know, Austen is not an active brother anymore. So how do you get the brothers to engage and feel passionate about it and get out there and engaged in the event?
Mhm. Yeah, that's a really good question. I think a lot of it is culture, and just being very persistent with it, because obviously I wasn't around when it was the event was initially founded, but from everything that I've heard speaking to a lot of the graduate brothers who were around during that time, it was one of those things where it started as a 1 year event and they weren't really sure, oh, do we do this next year? Do we not? We already have philanthropy events. And then they kind of realized, yeah, we should do this again. So they did it again for the second year, and then they did again for the third year and the fourth year and the fifth year, and it just kept going. And I remember even the event has changed. It's not been the same thing every year. It's changed as the brothers have changed, but the overall goal, the overall story, the mission has stayed the same. And I think just understanding what the mission is really important for the event, even if it's going to change as the chapter changes and grow with the chapter.
Mhm.
So we've seen a lot of changes, especially through COVID. That was the year that I was the CEO of the event, and during that time, it was all online. So that was quite interesting. And even leading up to that, a lot of us were talking, trying to figure out, do we keep going with this? It's been 10 years. And even their parents were saying, it's been 10 years. If you guys want to retire it, I mean, that's fine. But overall, our entire chapter has a culture around this mission, and
Mhm.
it's very passionate about it. And I think it's like fed into our culture, because even during our RNC at chapter meetings, everyone speaks very open and candidly about their mental health. And I believe that culture is entirely cultivated by the fact that we're hosting such a large scale event about this, where brothers in our chapter are just very comfortable being open with each other when they're having struggles.
Mhm. That's great. Yeah. So you said the events kind of ebbed and flowed, and I wanted to get your take. Now you're going to be 5 years from now, Andrew. You're going to be buying and selling companies left and right in your VP role, right? But
Hopefully.
if you could, you know, kind of give us a perspective of 5 years out, right? I know you're not going to be directly connected to it, but maybe some ideas and like how do you, on a personal, your personal take, 5 years from now, what do you think the event will look like?
Um, hmm. I personally I see 5 years from now that this is gonna grow outside of just our chapter.
Mhm.
That's kind of been in the conversation for the past 2 years, is how do we make this outside? We've never framed this philanthropy event as a like necessarily a Fiji philanthropy event. It was a very in honor of Fiji, ran by Fijis, entirely framed as its own individual event, set up as its own organization partnered with the CMHA. So we've talked about turning it into its own nonprofit. We've talked about partnering directly with other chapters across Canada, because the CMHA is quite a large organization, as I had mentioned, and the University of Calgary chapter and the University of Edmonton chapter also do philanthropy events for the CMHA. So we've tried to look at ways that we could partner with them. So I could easily see in 5 years that this event has grown past just our chapter into a bit more of a Canadian national event.
Yeah, that's great. And like we were saying, that the mission and mental health is not a Fiji discussion. It's a student discussion across all college, North America, across the world. Right?
Yeah, it really is.
So that's really cool. All right, this is kind of the parting shots, right? I wanted to add a couple more questions for you. So personally, what's been your proudest accomplishment with this event over the years and your involvement?
For me, it was definitely the year that I was fully in charge, because that was just such it was such an unbelievable experience. I know everyone, I don't know if this is a common phrase, I imagine it is though, where they say you get out more than what you give in, even if it doesn't feel like that while you're giving everything in. And so going through running an event of this size and organizing and speaking to all these different sponsors is always quite an interesting experience. You meet some interesting characters too. One time we met a bachelor, like a guy from The Bachelor, because he wanted to come keynote speak. So that was like, you meet interesting people, but at the same time, you also learn a lot. So in terms of my leadership, it let me develop in leading teams, because it's not just one person running this event. It's a committee of about 7 to 8 people, and then the entire chapter's weight is behind you. So when push comes to shove, you have the entire chapter get done, but it's really about 8 guys doing the groundwork and 1 dude pointing in a direction and saying run. And so having the opportunity to be the person who is getting to point in the direction and lead a team there and be like, this is what our goal is, everyone's on board, getting everyone on board, was a great leadership experience. And it really helped me in terms of how I work with teams. And it really makes me feel proud knowing how much we were able to produce and raise awareness about this event, and also even more just keeping those crisis counseling centers open on our campus. We've had brothers in our chapter who have spoken about using the service. We've had the CMHA tell us statistics. Obviously they can't tell us anything that would expose personal information, but they've told us quite a few statistics of the use in the past. And it's very fulfilling to know that you're making an impact on people that you've never met, and you're also learning skills at the same time just by getting involved.
Yeah. Andrew, that is called Building Courageous Leaders, which is over
yes,
shoulder there. So
building courageous leaders.
Yes, that's awesome. That's awesome. So here's the last question I have, right? So there's you have found an amazing niche, and there's chapters across North America that have done the same. But if there's chapters out there that are trying to find their cog, their wheel, you know, their purpose related to philanthropy, what advice would you give those chapters to find something they can be passionate about?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned earlier, really having that mission statement, the event isn't what's most important, it's the mission. And then once you have the mission and the goal, you can start to build the event around it. And you've got to grow outside of just your chapter or your Greek community into the greater chapter, greater community, as I mentioned. So being very involved with our city, with our student council, with the CMHA has really enabled us to be a lot more successful, because we've been given access to all these resources to help make this event work. And then once you kind of figure out what that mission is and what you want the initial event to be, just really persist through, keep going. It's not easy to stand up an event, but every year that you do it, it gets smoother and smoother. And eventually, as you said, it turns into another clockwork that just spins in your chapter, which is nice.
That's great. So Andrew, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show today. You individually, you as a chapter, have done amazing work with this event and supporting the Canadian Mental Health Association. And I want our audience to know that there's lots of resources out there at the international headquarters to support mental health, and we'll put some links and things on the bottom of the show. But I'll tell you what, Andrew, you're an impressive young man. You have a good future ahead of you, and really
Thank you.
appreciate what you've done for our fraternity up there at Western Ontario.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks for
And-
having me.
Oh, of course. Yeah, absolutely. So, and I'd also like to thank all of our listeners and brothers for joining us today on the Banks. We look forward to seeing you again the next time, where we will meet amazing brothers like Andrew. We'll share some incredible stories like we just did. And until next time, just want to let you know I'm mighty proud to be a Fiji.